Well, I'm glad you're here with us, Alex.
I'm really happy to be here. I haven't looked into the podcast too much, but I discovered it
That's all right.
actually through the students. I
Uh,
was working and they were like, "Yo," like these sixth graders are like, "Yo, Mr. Libson has a podcast. He shouted us out." And I was like, "Oh, word! Like, let's go." And I'd seen Andrew in his Lenin hoodie before, so I knew he was with it. So I was like, "Oh, what's it called? What's left?" I was like, "Oh, come on now. All right, let's see what's going on here."
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo, co-host, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson, and socialist Kenny Cepeda. We're online at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my personal social media handle as at Don Eduardo Barca on Instagram. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode where we found this episode. We also have shirts. If you'd like to have any of our merch, you can contact us through our blog, and Andy will respond to you. All right, thank you. Now that we've got housekeeping in order, we've got an episode today where we're going to We're going to have a discussion with Alexander. Is it Alex or Alexander? Sorry.
Either way, in fact, you hit on something. When I was a little younger, I had this whole personality psychological split. Who am I, Alex or Alexander? What does one mean? I was having this sort of, it doesn't matter, whatever you want to call
All right.
it.
Well, we're having a discussion with Alex, teacher, colleague of Andy Lipson, someone who's also on the left, and we'll be having a discussion on some of the ideas that we've discussed over email about World War I and the state of the left and so on. But Andy, why don't you take it from here so that you can sort of also give us an intro into why you thought we should have this episode.
Yeah, well, first off, I got to know Alex at Aurum Prep, and pretty early on, he seemed to at least see that some of my clothes were like Soviet stuff and communist stuff, and hey, are you a communist? And I was like, yes. And he's a communist. Well, I don't know if you consider it, but he was communist.
We'll cross that bridge.
Right. But he was certainly friendly to hearing that. It wasn't like that. So early on, this was somebody who was saying, I'm from the left, that he's from the left, I'm from the left. And we had always talked about like getting together and just chatting about our different views. Then later, you learned about me having a podcast, What's Left. That's very recent, right?
Yeah, it was within the last 2 months or so.
And remember how people who've been following the show know I've been doing middle school shout outs because my middle school students found out how to podcast. Well, one of the first people they told was this guy. And so
because I worked with him in the after school program and I also helped him during regular school. So
yeah. And so he was like, hey, I would like to be on your podcast. And I was like, I would love to have you on my podcast. Now, my reason for wanting to have him is one, it just gets the ball rolling on discussions we haven't had any before. So let's start it here. But two, this is a person who's in person, right? Like, and I got to see Alex put together an event, a musical event that was for around Palestine and supporting the cause there and opposing the bombings and the attacks on Palestine, and also talking about the history of Cinco de Mayo. And so, I was struck by like Alex gave a presentation there, and that was really good. So I'm always looking for allies, and it's even more important when those allies are literally ones you can touch and be with. And by the way, when Alex was going to do this episode, I was going to give him another little box to be in, and he was like, "Can you not? Can I actually be present with you?" And I said, "Okay, let's do that." So that's a very good sign for me, because obviously we know that none of these boxes are going to liberate us; they are boxes. Like Alex, I wanted to see where this goes, but really, I'm hoping it's about where it goes, not just in the context of what's left, but in the context of revolution and the prospects of trying to organize. And both of us are going different ways, probably work-wise, but I want to stay in touch, and I want to see where this thing takes us, because the world is not getting better. So, I mean, maybe if you want to say anything in response to some of that.
Not without us. I'll pick that right up. Well, just to give everyone sort of my own little introduction, My name is Alex, Alexander as well. I am an after-school teacher. I also am sort of a teaching instructional aide during the regular day. But in my personal life, I'm a musical artist. I do a little bit of graphic design too, just, one of the general sort of eclectic bohemian types. As you can see, I'm wearing the standard issue artistic outfit right now, so just to let everyone know who exactly I am.
And you're a DJ.
And yeah, I mean, I'm more of an MC than a DJ. I like to get a party going. I love to dance. I'm Mexican American. Both my parents come from Mexico, legal immigrants. I'm originally from Bakersfield, California. Shouts out to the Central Valley. I've been living out here in Oakland for the past 3 years. I'm totally in love with it. Absolutely, of course, partially because of the radical history here and the reception that I've had with the community. Obviously, being in a school for the past 2 years now has been really important to being able to make connections that have been really meaningful with general community members, even more than the place where I'm from originally. It's been a really pivotal experience, and just like Andrew said, I really want to see where this goes, because I've had a general yearning for organization, but like so many people in our modern era, I've felt very alienated. I felt very sectioned off. Everything's so atomized. And yeah, I'm really hoping to undo that and use some sort of inertial force to turn this into more and more things with time. And I also believe that little things are beautiful, and even if this is just us, sitting here talking, having some drinks and enjoying each other's company, that was worth it. Even if it doesn't end up becoming some sort of wonderful revolutionary thing, which of course we all desire for it to be, I think it's still worth our time. So thank you for having me on. I feel very welcome.
Welcome. So yeah, well, I'm excited, for whoever's listening or watching us. We don't really know you. This is the first time meeting you, for Eduardo and I. Or Eduardo, I don't know if you've met or talked on the phone. So prior to us recording, you told us that you haven't really listened to, our podcast. You don't have exactly a sense of our beliefs and stuff. So that makes me excited because I feel that often we get lost in the context. I feel like a lot of people just know our positions from previous episodes, and at times it's good to kind of restate, where we're at, and we evolve too with each conversation. I believe, with each exposure to new content, new ideas. We like to talk to all sorts of different people that bring different things to the table. So I'm excited to talk to you. And on that note, I was curious if you could maybe share, because you do call yourself a leftist, and maybe talk about how did you come to the left, or or how was that process, and and maybe say why you're not so much a communist.
Well, no, yeah, I gave that little disclaimer there. Yeah, of course you caught that. I couldn't escape that. I knew I would have to account for that before the tribunal. No, so just to kind of give a quick historical summary of my own involvement. So I was raised, by immigrant Mexican parents. We're very Catholic, so sort of my origins were very mixed in that. But it's a funny little thing. So I've always been a super book nerd, history obsessed guy. That's since I was a very young kid. Those are the books that I gravitated to, and I started reading at a really advanced, level for my age or whatever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I've always kind of been looking. And funnily enough, when I was really little, I thought I was a Republican because I had read about Lincoln and how he had freed the slaves, and I was like, "Oh, they're that's cool," because I had no idea of what was going on, with Bush at the time and all of that. But I actually quickly disabused myself of that. I must have been 10 or 11 years old. And I was like, oh, actually Bush sucks, and then, 9/11, I remember that vaguely. That was terrible, and then obviously, as I got older and older, peers started talking about it a little bit. I started defining myself within that space. But also my family in Mexico, they were very involved with the anti-PRI movements, the AMLO sort of campaign. I went to the marches for the Yo Soy 132. I might get the number wrong, but that whole era. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mexican politics, but there was around that time of Peña Nieto's election, there was the controversy about the students that got killed in Guerrero, which is the state that actually my family's from on my mom's side. So that was a personal thing as well. And I got to see tens of thousands of people out on the streets for people's movements. I mean, these are students that came from an explicitly, leftist sort of academy. And these were common people, regular people that were all standing up on their behalf, so experiences like that really gravitated me towards it, and I was also, I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit it, I was a little bit of an edgelord. I was like, oh, communism, like, oh yeah, Marx, like, I'm gonna do that, like, let's go, and maybe it started a little insincerely, but I've always had like a real life root to it. And as I got older and more into high school, college years is when really through discussion with my peers and then also people that were a little more involved, a little further into the situation, I started defining myself. In terms of what, if I want to give myself a label, right? This is the whole conundrum that I get myself into. Well, I guess I have to say I'm most comfortable with the left because it's a resonance thing. I mean, I know that I'm on the left. I know that I'm reading the so-called leftist, books. I'm around leftist groups. I'm interested in leftist causes. I mean, that much is for sure, and I need to be able to define something. But when it comes to the question of socialism versus communism versus anarchism, I find myself vacillating between all three. And I also find myself as an earnest critic of what they stand for historically and what we have to do in the modern context for our particular struggle. And so I'm not so worried with necessarily aligning myself with one of those names. I would say generally, if I have to put myself somewhere, maybe ANCOM kind of general or like sort of left communist, council communist kind of, those are the things that I'm, the Zapatistas, Luxembourg, the CNTFAI, stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of the lane that I'm in. But again, I really want to put it out there that I don't want to limit myself, but at the same time, and this is going to be part of what I want to say about the First World War, I am against what I would say, just to keep it very direct, lame social democrat reformers, like people who kowtow to like, the capitalists and end up using right wingers in their search for civility and so-called decorum. I'm definitely a radical in that sense. I'm against all of this because I think we need real revolution. So that's why when it comes to, I'm friendly to communists, I'm friendly to anarchists, I'm friendly to radical socialists because those are the people that believe in revolution of some kind. So, yeah.
I just wanted to respond. That is very refreshing to hear, because like that's been my journey. It's, similar. Like I've had to, deconstruct a lot of the romanticism of saying I'm a communist, I'm a Marxist, and being a realist and coming to terms with the historical, shit that's happened, in the name of whatever. And but it is refreshing to hear that, and because I think on that level we are on the same side. Like we are for revolution. No reformism, no none of that BS. And so I'm glad to hear that, and I'm breathing a little more right now.
I have one question. Have you been part of an organization before, or are you a part of an
So I've been very peripheral to organizations. I've been involved before. So in terms of giving my time to organizations, I have. I'm definitely a fellow traveler type of person. I've never stayed too long. I've never been an official member of anything. I was involved with the Bernie campaign the first time around that he
2016.
Yeah, the original time. I mean, that was a whole, even then I wasn't necessarily like a Democrat. It was just like I wanted to buy into the idea that perhaps somebody could shift the Overton window and like we would have, electoralism could maybe give us something. I mean, I've always been kind of a critic of it, but I've also not been, I don't want to close myself off to strategy. And that was a campaign that I invested into. Second time around, absolutely not. I've been friends with people in things like DSA. I considered recently, because they've been involved a lot with the Palestine protests, the PSL. But honestly, I mean, I'm kind of an opponent of democratic centralism, and I think they do a little too much historical apologia for my taste. So, that's kind of where I stand with that right now.
I too am Mexican, Alex, and so maybe we could have, as I just annotated a few notes. Maybe we can have another episode on some of the stuff that you're talking about, like which you mentioned, the Partido Revolucionario Institucional, which is the right now there's Mexican elections happening at this time. So I think there's a lot to say regarding Mexican politics.
And one thing I will note, and you should, Eduardo, there are many things about Mexican politics you wanted to discuss on What's Left.
Yeah.
I think we now have another person to join us on that.
Right. So I think what I'll do is I'm just writing a few notes. We'll have some of those conversations on another separate episode, since we've had sort of this idea of where we're heading this. And what happens in other episodes is we touch all over the place. And take Jake, for example, and then we end up having a very long discussion.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to just tighten the episode a bit. So
that's totally fine. Yeah.
We'll have a conversation about those things, which I am interested. But I'm also appreciative of the fact that you are in this, as you say, this space between anarchists and socialists, and see the Zapatista movements as well as other movements, and you don't seem to particularly stand as one, and that's all right. And the fact that you were just on this side, though, with some of the more revolutionaries and not with the standard sort of centrists, Democrats, or even buying into maybe more of the mainstream left that most people would talk about in the Bay Area, that's very prominent. I look forward to those discussions, and we can sort out those weeds in other episodes. But for this episode, I'd like for us to get into it. I'd like for us to discuss what makes you, as you said in your email, World War I. I thought to myself, what about World War I did you want to get into?
Yeah.
There's so much to say.
Of course, there's a ton to say. I'll give you sort of because this is, and this is what I told Andrew, is like, this is kind of my pet, rant a lot, like I'm looking for absolutely anyone who will hear me out, on this thing, so thank you for giving me the space. And here's kind of an introductory sort of message about it. So, especially within the context of the United States, we're dealing with a very crippled left, and a left that has had to deal with a lot of moderation, a lot of this, a lot of that, a lot of calls for civility, a lot of infiltration of the radical parts. So I think we need to draw lessons both from our own context and from similar, but of course still unique contexts that exist historically. And one of the most important ones, because it exists during what I would call like an axis point in history, and we are sort of at an axis point ourselves, being within the American Empire. But in this case, we're talking about Europe around the time of the First World War. Several years before the war ever broke out, I mean, most informed observers knew that war was coming. There was a convoluted system of alliances that existed, and capital was certainly prepared to go to war. And so the socialist movement of the world, at that time, there was still the Second International. They gathered and they made a proclamation at that time. And Lenin has an essay about this that I was reading a lot too. So I was just to kind of refresh myself on this. But they all said, hey, we're going to oppose this movement unilaterally. Essentially, they said, we're not going to support proletarians taking up arms against each other. And it's going to be left at that. So, wow, what a great thing. They're prescient. They're being proactive, as I was saying. I believe in proactivity versus reactivity. For us, being a reactionary is an insult. So of course we need to be proactive. We need to be advancing. Can
I add a
sure
to it too? So the other thing to know, because I think people hear about World War I, they hear about revolution, and you might think he's talking about Russia right now. But the center of axis of these discussions was not Russia, even though Russian revolutionaries were included, because everyone could see this was going to involve Germany, France, Britain, United States, and Russia.
Italy, all that,
and Italy, I guess, as well. But the center of axis of this opposition was really Germany, because Germany was where the biggest, the crown jewel of the Second International, the largest revolutionary party, had most newspapers, most cadres, most power. And all of them before World War I told themselves, if you read any of their papers, they were opposed to imperialist war. Workers should not fight other workers under any case. That was in their papers. That was what came out of their mouth. So everyone was just like, okay, here it comes. Now is going to be the big test. And this test was really a German test that would then, obviously Russia would then have its own relationship to that test, in France and Britain and the United States and Italy. But this the real center of the sense of opposition to imperial war was everyone saw coming out of Germany. That was our Mike Tyson for fighting, and if the blow was going to be waged against capital, it was going to come from Germany.
Yeah, because not only were they the largest socialist, trade unionist, etc., anarchist, movements at that time, they were also, of course, the aggressive new young blood imperialists. Their government, at the Kaiser, Wilhelm II, he sort of symbolically represented this bullish, colonialist, imperialist policy. So it would have definitely strangled the vanguard of imperialist capital right there, in the way that we historically were subjected to strangulation, by the Freikorps and people like that, it was our opportunity. And I think you're identifying exactly, you're basically stealing the words out of my mouth. There's so much to be said about particularly the German response and the German situation that also has to do with us here in America today, in the 2020s, because they were sort of on this pivot point, and they were in the lead, I guess, for lack of a better term. And just to pick it back up from where I was saying, so you have these promises, 2 years, 1912, all these promises, as Andrew was saying. War comes along, you have all these sacred unions, the historicity of it says the Sacrée Union gets it from what it was called in France, the sacred union. But the mainstream socialist response to the outbreak of the First World War was essentially, we have to support the government, we can't lose out on our parliamentary gains, we can't lose out on our trade protections. It's more worth it to gain acceptance. They thought, scientific socialism says we need to go through this stage of, we have the republics, the nationalism. It's just something we have to work through. Let's support it. This was essentially the response. I mean, in so many words, there was a gradation from it. Some people were maybe a little less nakedly, hypocritical about it. Karl Kautsky, is one that kind of vacillated. I mean, this is very niche historical stuff, but there was a little bit back and forth, but generally it was seen as a radical. It suddenly went from being the mainstream, totally accepted party line to being a radical left position to oppose the war, a war that was one of the least sensible wars of all time. Because here's my thing: World War I made it so that World War II could even be possible. World War II is the war that everyone gets, all caught up in. Oh, Nazism, this, there was evil was at work. Well, you know what? World War I, if the workers of the world had really gone through the reaction that could have happened if the German movement had operated correctly, it would have been a totally different situation because, the forces of reaction got to win, fascism got to have its birth, instead of, there being revolution. And I actually hold, this is something else I was telling Andrew. Of course, I believe in social history. I think individualist histories are outmoded, all of that. But I think there's a relationship between the individual or the small scale and the social or the large scale. Because in the case of the German reaction to the First World War, their leaders on so many levels, in so many instances, their actions directly caused the failure of the German Revolution, is my thesis. And I think those are lessons we need to learn when it comes to basically not being too indecisive, remembering our actual radical core, not bowing down, putting down limits and boundaries for where it's absolutely necessary and not crossing that line. No pasarán, as our comrades in Spain had to say, a couple of decades later. These are the kinds of things that I want to talk about.
And I want to add one other thing about, because these arguments that people were making at the time, even though Alex is maybe characterizing them as minutia, they're the same types of things leftists and revolutionaries will say today to justify what's called opportunism, to justify making deals with somebody to say, we can move the football a few yards forward by doing this. I think what this is really, though, is, in broad strokes, this is where reformism is literally the pit. Some people think of reformism as halfway going to revolution, and it is not. It is literally going the opposite way you want to go to. And German Revolution is a perfect example. One of the major defenses that the revolutionaries made at the time of saying, this war is bad, but we have to defend our side, and we will put money into that war credits. We will support money going to the war effort, is because our side, look, we're Germany. We have this massive social democracy. We have trade unions. We have socialists in parliament. look at those fucking Russians with their czar, feudal. Like, that's the king. They believe that they have God and the king. That backward shit is coming our way. If they take it over, all this is lost. The socialists will be lost. They're going to take us backwards into history. So I get it. Look, we're against all this in the first place, but we can't let that backwards history come into us. And on this basis of preserving these reforms that they had won, they gave up on revolution and made it so that instead of revolution, there is the legacy of fascism that people put there. There's plenty of fascism to go around, but if you want to put it just in German, and it did have a particular historical impact of taking that approach towards social change, as opposed to saying, no, it's all or nothing. We're going for this, and we're not going to take half of it. We have to go for the whole change instead of a piece of it, because going for a piece of it was the justification for staying in the war.
And just relating this to where we're at right now, prior to the First World War too, right? There was these debates between like Bernstein and Luxembourg, and the reformist route taking root, right? We talked about this with Jeff, and and people believing that capitalism essentially wasn't so bad; it could be tamed, and that was the current that took root, essentially, and ended in what you just described. And because they also were at a period where they didn't see major wars, right? And they thought that the world was heading towards a more peaceful, or manageable, way, a manageable way of living, I guess, or existing in the world. And yet the World War happened, and then another one, and and here we are again, right? Where I feel like a lot of people don't think it's so bad, or are not aware that we can head to this massive explosion of violence and destruction that is brought about by the capitalist system, and these nation states vying for domination and not sharing at all. And so again, just bringing parallel to where we're at today, in the sense of we've discussed here often that we are heading to a massive destruction. We in some ways we've already started that process, with the conflicts that we've discussed in the show, and so yeah, just bring parallels, that this reformist route does not end in peace and civility in the management of a brutal system. It's just conceding to the brutality of the system that inevitably explodes.
Yeah, because this is really part of a narrative that weaves, again, because this is also my attack against all liberals, because part of their sort of cause, they have this mythologization of the Second World War. They say we were the great protectors of freedom and liberty, the oppressed peoples. When the world cried out for help, the democracies of the world answered. Nazism simply couldn't be allowed to exist. Yada yada yada. This is the yarn that they try to push out there. But the reality of the fact, when you look at something like denazification, right? People who started off in the First World War and then into the Freikorps, killing Rosa Luxemburg, right? They then went into the Nazi system and were rehabilitated as necessary for the West German military. And even, for example, for the United Nations, right? Where there was a SS cavalry officer who was a United Nations general, secretary general, right? These are, my thing is, even though for the modern audience, this might seem like I'm trying to bring up some historical ghost, these are threads that are so strongly and viscerally still running through our time that if you get lost in all the noise and fury of what's going on, you can easily lose track of it. But again, I'm trying to show that there is a very direct line. The whole liberal justification for this moderationism is this, listen, we just have to avoid excess. You don't want to be like the Nazis, do you? But it's like, no, you created the Nazis, right? If you want to look at Palestine, right? Israel created Hamas, right? This whole idea of, but the worst, watch out. But listen, there's too many other monsters out there. But you have to see how those monsters are actually part of your coterie. Like whether or not consciously, because, I don't want to get into talks about conspiracy or whatever. I want to try to deal with historically verifiable facts. But whether it's consciously or not, the social democrats of that time and of this time are essentially, operating as ringmasters for the monsters that we call fascists, nationalists, religious fundamentalists, they're abiding by them, because the reality of their moderation isn't them shielding us from our opponents. It's them allowing our opponents in to our entire base, and allowing us to be infiltrated, allowing us to be stymied, starving us of any general popular support. I mean, so many things happen because of the direct actions of certain individuals. It's not necessarily because of a mass pressure. Many times you hear, or you read these articles about how, oh, Americans secretly want socialism. When you phrase it a certain way, people want all these things. They want healthcare. They want to be more in control of the system. This and that. Of course, yeah, the mass feeling is there, but there is a way in which the efforts of individuals, so-called leaders, ends up tricking the whole situation, flipping it into something else. And that's part of the whole evil of capital. It's reappropriation. So we believe in the appropriation of wealth. They believe in the reappropriation of spiritual energy. They flip it back out. It's this whole jujitsu move of saying, oh, well, you know what? Let me subvert that energy and bring it into this entire different thing. And I'm going to come dressed as your friend, as your cousin, as your brother, who's saying, oh, listen, weren't we part of the same party 10 years ago? Let's just listen to me. Don't do that thing. I was just watching a video where it was about the death of Rosa Luxemburg and the failure of the so-called Spartacist revolt. And some members of the SPD, the German Social Democratic Party, which the communists had until very recently been a part of, they heard about the death of or execution, and they said, oh, well, I guess that's what they get for agitating like that. And one of their other compatriots was like, what? What are you talking about? That was our friend. Like, you killed them. You are the one that killed them. You want to act as if they got what they deserve for being so radical. I mean, and how many times in my life and in so many other people's lives have I heard, again, this kind of respectability politics, especially being a brown man in the United States, a radical brown man in the United States. Hey, chill out, calm it down. Oh, you don't want to go there. Where's that coming from? Where is that really coming from? Are you really looking out for my best interest, or are you actually allowing our enemies to take over this entire thing? And for some reason, you are still standing while me and my people are not.
Well, I kind of just wanted to comment, like, overall, like, I feel what you're saying, and also it also shows, right, like where we're at now, like how much of a head fixing, that's Lipson's word or phrase, has happened, through all these generations in the Second World War, right? To believe that we have progressed somehow in virtue, in values, coming victorious, of a moral victory over the evil Nazis, and that's the story that we're told, right? Like that's the highest point of evil, but we're not told, about the fire bombings, right? Like that kills many people, the bombs, in all the conflicts, that have happened since, that are not considered as brutal because they were not the Second World War, but nonetheless, they have destroyed many countries, many lives, and it created a lot of misery. But along, in that journey, we've been taught, that this civility is what brings progress, and this civility is what is going to change the world, right? And all you need to do is like be a good person and go to school and inject yourself in the system and be that radical voice inside the system, right? That is going to make a difference. And I think that's the story that we are told in the educational system, that we had many conversations about that here, that that we see it more of a place of indoctrination, of preparation for exploitation. It's not about liberation, especially the mainstream institutions. But that's what we're competing against, right? Like this loss of memory, and that's why I think it's important to talk about these things that you're talking about, and contextualize it, because yes, their history, and some people may not be as excited about this stuff, but like you said, there is a thread that still runs to this day, and that we're going to be faced with similar choices in a different context. But we are, we are. I feel like we're a lot closer to that period leading up to the First or Second World War than maybe the second, than anything else. And so, just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, and the thing that comes up for me, because you had said, the idea that people are probably more open to socialism than we are led to let on. And they often say that in terms of a set of questions like Medicare for all, immigrant rights, opposition to prison system, unions. Those are some, quote, left positions that people attribute, and then we'll say, well, do you like socialism? And people are like, oh, I hear that, yeah. I'm more skeptical of that sort of assessment of our of the working class, or the class, and it's led me to actually no longer even though I consider myself historically from the left, I no longer at this point don't think of my audience as either a left audience or a right audience. I currently, and again, this is a guess, because one of the lessons from the German Revolution is you can have all the fucking bullet points about I'm for this, for this, for this, for this, for this, and he and I would both agree with those things. We would think that's leading you directly to revolution, and millions of people who believe that will swerve completely against it. That can happen, right? And that decimated Rosa Luxemburg when it happened. She became suicidal when she saw the swerve that happened. We have felt a similar swerve, and it's come up for revolutionaries who oppose this COVID measures. We saw a similar swerve then when revolutionaries essentially sided with the state with mandates and COVIDs and big pharma, and made friends with the state, versus when, hey, I thought you were against all these corporations, things like that. So we use that analogy as a level of kind of betrayal for many of us. But so currently, I think the barometer for me is less, would you be open to socialism? But it's kind of more like, do you believe you live in a tyranny? Do you believe you live in a dictatorship? And would you be willing to take arms against it? I mean, and if currently, you will find maybe more people on the right who will be on, but let's be clear, if those people don't get clear about open borders, about some of the questions, like I think the left and the liberal left is all wrong on its control guns. If you get that position wrong, the state is going to is going to eat your lunch. But similarly, for the people who do get, no, we need to be able to have our guns. But if you don't get the fact that the border is going to be used to not just control, quote, immigrants, but control you, then your guns are wasted, because politically you are incapable of dealing with your opponent. So they're going to get you to fire on the wrong people.
And I really want to emphasize this point, because let's even look. So we were kind of briefly, casting out judgments on the Social Democrats. I want to look at the rank and file of the right-wing reaction, because we're hitting upon something that's such a perfect parallel to our current American situation. You have mostly veterans, but a lot of them were working class people or were from the peasant class. They weren't necessarily rich landowners or anything like that. There are people that were done wrong by their country's national movements, but they were lied. They bought into this lie of the national myth. They bought into this lie of, well, ultimately, which is the same lie that the Social Democrats were buying into on some level. Ultimately, this country, this nation, this state is for my best interests. Or even if it's not currently doing what's for my best interests, it needs to be renovated but preserved,
or brought back to a period,
or something, right? However you want to put it. At that point, it's kind of inconsequential, because obviously they're still allied on this level of they won't let go of the security blanket of the state.
Yeah.
And this is why, in many ways, I'm very friendly to anarchism, because obviously, if you're hearing what I'm saying right now, I mean, this is like very, very classical kind of anarchist theory. Any appeal to the state is also an appeal to capital. It's an appeal to, like how you're saying, do you want to be in tyranny or not? And this is where, the so-called right libertarians, in a way, there's a common struggle. I mean, obviously, in the modern context, I wouldn't even try to have that conversation with most right libertarians, because they are insane. But, I think the question of this, the search for freedom, the search for liberation, the search for collective advancement, all at the same time, because they can be potentially contradictory, but trying to synthesize, right? We are dialectical at the end of the day. Sometimes I feel like we need to remind ourselves, aren't we looking for dialectics? Shouldn't we be trying to synthesize? I think trying to do all of that involves, understanding, well, these guys that were our enemies, in a way, there was a legitimacy to what they were doing. Because, they believed in having power and in moving decisively. Because one of the things that even made the defeat of the so-called, again, I say so-called Spartacists, because that was a media move by the SPD and the right wing to call it Spartacist. It was a much wider movement than the people that were actually members of the actual Spartacist organizational group, right? And so it's another thing. So that's why I call it so-called one, but that is what it gets called historically. So I don't want to be. But anyway, when you're looking at that, the response of these people of we're gonna have a plan, we have our leaders, we have our orders, and we're gonna follow them. The right wing were the people that had that. And where do we see that? We see that in the United States, right? It's not hard to see that the right wing militias are working together. While they might have ideological difficulties with each other, things like Charlottesville or whatever show that their ability to form a united front is much more advanced than ours. And I think we fail ourselves by not giving them that sort of, I don't want to say credit, but necessarily that correct assessment of the actual facts. We need to sort of get our shit together, again, for lack of a better, more academic term or whatever. We need to get our shit together because these guys are way ahead of us. And historically, when that happened, that we were destroyed. It was like ask them what happened in Germany. Like, there's this really great movie that I was watching about the Spanish Civil War, where there's this German communist volunteer, and he's participating in this discussion. He says we need revolution because in Germany we had the largest workers' movement, and look what happened to us. We had Nazis because there was all this call for moderation. There was all this calls for not revolution, not now, revolution later, and look where it led us. And I as scary as the prospect of revolution can be, and as much as people want to use the historical examples of the Soviet Union, of a failed socialist state, and I don't want to discount the real lived experiences of the people that had to suffer that repression, we need to realize that the world we live in is a horrific one. Capitalism is horrific. There is a lie to this perpetual peace of capitalism. This is something that I want to return to from earlier in our discussion that has been brought up multiple times already. How could we possibly strive for peace in a world where the basic assumption is competition? Like, just on a basic logical level, linguistic level, it doesn't really work out. If your goal is peace between all mankind and the avoidance of general conflict and war, how could you possibly do that when people are psychologically always being trained to get one up and to learn dirty tactics and to do whatever is necessary to compete, right? If you're not actively engaged in that process of learning to collaborate, because I'm not even saying, oh, naturally we're supposed to be socialists, we're supposed to be communist. I'm not making these, I've heard these kinds of biological attempts. I think we can be. Biologically, we can evolve to be that, and our consciousness gives us the tool necessary to choose that biological evolution, but we need to make that choice. We need to do that thing. We need to get organized. We need to make decisive steps. We need to say we are actually looking for cultural revolution, social revolution, economic revolution, political revolution, revolution in all areas, revolution wherever we can find it. We can be realists and idealists at the same time. I think it is necessary to be both in order to actually sort of loop the loop and avoid the historical mistakes that we're talking about right
now. Man, you have a gift.
So I think you're right, Alex, that we have seen in recent times the we're using these conventional terms, right and left, just for our audience sake. So, but we understand that there's a lot of nuance in between them. But so the right, I suppose, as you say, it has been more organized. We clearly see it even with the 6th of January, where they were able to stand up to the state. Not that I necessarily agree with that, their ideology or what they were for, but the fact they were able to take the Capitol, well, not the Capitol, the halls of the Congress, and be able to stand up to the state was incredible. I mean, I think that shows us what, if you gather a collective of people that could potentially be on the right page, they could do something about it. Unfortunately, we've seen what happens afterwards. It was an example of what could happen to anybody that stands up against the state, which is a complete, persecution of what happens to people who stand up against the state. That's how I see it. It took me some time to finally step back and see it that way. Just to be fair, though, there are people on the left. I just pulled up something quickly because I remembered that during COVID, during the lockdowns, there was in 2020 the camp on Capitol Hill neighborhood in Seattle that did take over even the East President building of the police department. They were the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone Jazz, or organized protest in Seattle, where they were able to take over a place for 23 days, the occupied zone, that would attract national media attention and become the focus of heated political debate. They were in Seattle taking over this place. So I think there are people on the left that could be seen, even such as BRICS, or not BRICS. It's called what were these? Forgot, the anti-fascists. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we there are folks on the left that I think that could be sort of applauded for their attempt to try to have a more revolutionary stance, more taking matters into their own hands, and not just doing this whole kumbaya sort of thing that could always be overtaken and co-opted by a Democrat left, right? But it does. You're right. I do think that the right has shown and illustrated for us what it could mean for the rest of us as working class folk. Even if you see Bundy taking over, I don't see. I've said this on episodes before. I hope it happens, but it's very hard for me to see how in the USA you can occupy territory like the Zapatistas without government intervention. It's going to take, I mean, the closest thing I've seen, even in recent times, has been the Bundy, that movement. That I think it was in Oregon, and then they were overtaken. Like the police came in and said, no, you're not going to occupy. All over the USA, this is a big country with lots of space, and you haven't seen the level of occupation that the Zapatistas have done, and so how do we take that example in other countries, in Colombia, in Mexico, in other parts of Latin America, in other parts of even Haiti, which I know it's contentious to speak about Haiti, but like what we see in Haiti with gangs of people, speak of them in gangs in national media, but the gangs overtaking and stopping Kenyan forces to come over to Haiti to police their country, and even not allowing the prime minister to come back to the country. Like, that is the force that we want to see, it that has that much control, that comes from the people. Whether I agree with our ideologies, again, I'm just stating this not for you all, but for the audience, because people think, are you aligning to these? I'm not aligning with anyone. I'm just giving these examples of people that have shown force when necessary for people to maybe take those examples. And then if we have the right ideology aligned as working class folk, then we can do it together. Like, we can work together. But in this country, I haven't seen that level of revolutionary occupation force as I'd like to see it. And that's a discussion I think we should have in the future. It's like, what can we learn from past and guerrilla forces and current forces, so that we can be on the same page. And
I do want to attempt to cover that at least briefly right now, because you guys are giving me a lot right now. This is one of the best discussions I've ever had. Thank you so much.
Can I throw one thing in?
Sure. Throw it in, but I just have a whole...
Keep that thought, because I want to put something out a little different than the way Eduardo did, so that you can decide if you agree with Eduardo, if you agree with where I'm going to come, or you have a third way.
Sure.
Because I most agreed with you when you said that whether you hail from the left or when you hail from the right, both sides seem to be trapped and infatuated with maintaining the state. And if you are doing that, then you are equally caught by your rulers. You're going to be equally caught. And I would say that the Charlottesville movement, the January 6th for sure, as much as I am opposed to anybody calling that thing an insurrection or anything like that, the January 6th movement was not in any way politically independent. It was literally a movement of the FBI to basically force people who hailed Trump and whatever but to basically then justify a state crackdown.
Entrapment, yeah.
It was more like the Reichstag fire kind of stuff that the Nazis were doing.
Yeah.
Closer to that, not on that scale, but closer to that. And so what I have seen, and this is where I might counter with you saying, "Oh, there's nothing to be talked with the libertarian right." I have seen that both in the same way that, like for liberals, caught up in, Clinton, then Obama, then caught up in Clinton too, Hillary Clinton, then now Biden. Like no matter what happens, they keep coming back.
Circus,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, like it almost seems like an insanity, right? And it is.
It is an insanity.
Yeah. And you can see a similar, and I do know that there's a similar thing on the right, which no matter what, there are people who oppose some of the things that Trump was trying to do, but what appealed to them was his seemingly going in there as a wrecking ball, which he isn't. He's part of that apparatus. But and they even acknowledge that, he didn't really drain the swamp. He didn't do he didn't end the wars. But they think he's going to go mess their shit up a little bit. But those people are equally captured, in the context of hoping that they can do something with the election and things like that. So I would actually say that there's a very much an equivalence of I used to actually think of the right as more organized, and I don't any longer. Like, particularly as I'm working in the freedom movement and I see all these people who left the Democratic Party now going to the Republican Party, and they want to go through the spin cycle again, but a lesser evil of the Republican Party. They left Democratic Party, left lesser evilism, and they're switching over to Republican lesser, and they literally, that's a lateral move politically. They didn't move anywhere. They're staying right where they were before. They don't see it that way. They think they're moving somewhere to get more to what they want. But so I would actually say, and this is the reason that I still feel that there's an audience on both sides, because they seem to me equivalently shattered, and equivalently just kind of still trapped in the state narrative. And so in that regard, not that it's an open season for us, it's actually a bad situation we're in, but I actually see much more equivalency between the left and the right, and I'm saying that from a podcast originator of What's Left was saying, what the fuck happened to the left? But the right is just as broken, in my opinion. And in fact, both sides are played against each other as a part of this little game.
Yeah.
Well, and you have a point to say. I just wanted to.
Sure. I'm going to cover your point really quickly, and then I'm going to circle back around to what I wanted to say originally. Yeah. So in terms of, I will say this, of all the forces of the right libertarians are the ones who, just on a discussion level, sure, I'd have a discussion with them, because if the premise is we're trying to figure out what liberty and freedom means, I mean, I think there's some leverage there. Mm-hmm. But the unfortunate part of the whole situation is that they've allied themselves with religious fundamentalists, with racialists, with extremists of that kind, actual Nazis and fascists. In many cases, like when it comes to things like the Proud Boys or whatever, like, even though they're not explicitly libertarian movements, they use libertarian iconography, they draw from libertarian crowds. And I think there needs, again, this is one of those lines in the sand that I think needs to be drawn. It's like, yes, we're all angry about the government, but what are we angry about? This will also cover your point about, like, or I guess somebody made the point about, like, Bundy and everything like that, they're getting covered. How, what is the example there? Well, I mean, on one level, it's like, well, these are white men getting away with this. These are white conservative men who are essentially the privileged class of this country. They're having a tantrum, which is kind of the way I see fascism in a lot of ways. I mean, there is a working class story to the development of fascism ideologically, but in many ways, it's also kind of a middle class, or sort of at least mainstream class, approved class kind of tantrum in a lot of ways. They want to re-edify their privileges. Anyone that wants to create segregated privilege for their class of people, or for some other idealized class of people, should be opposed, because my version of revolution is about bringing a revolution of consciousness and bringing understanding to all people, and that, meaning an equal exchange of a horizontal exchange and organization. And I think the people on the right, where maybe they have the same starting premise as us on a certain level in terms of opposing state power, I think a lot of them and this is kind of my gripe against right libertarianism. Again, you're still operating under the presumption of competition. eventually you're going to create some body, whether even if it's not legally bound, it's going to be psychologically wound up in this kind of tribal mentality of, well, we're out to gun for you, and we need to get rid of that spirit. And I think that's part of, again, why I still resolutely consider myself to be within the left, is because I think that's I think while there are inroads to be made with people that are on the right now, and we shouldn't always necessarily be combative with individuals if we're given the chance to talk to them, I also think we need to make it clear that we're not looking to make an equivocation between our struggles, because their struggle is a struggle for competition, a struggle for privilege, a struggle for identity overall, and that's something that I want to oppose in the strongest terms possible. When it comes to the question of what kind of lessons we can learn when it comes to historical examples of insurrection, revolution, etc., as well as ones that are currently going on, I would say that for us here in the United States, we need to organize concretely. We need to have mass organizations, like what the right can show us, what historical organizations can show us. You need some level of mass support. I mean, adventurism is not going to work. Propaganda of the deed, an old historical anarchist strategy, that's not going to work. Terrorism essentially is also something I wanted to loop back into this. Historically, in the 60s and 70s, here in this country, there was the so-called New Left. And, there was this resurgence of radical left thinking, the Weather Underground, things like this. And it wasn't just in the United States, it was also in Europe, places like this. But, there was no mass movement, or they failed to connect to a mass movement. And it was a total waste of everyone's time, from my point of view, mostly because, for example, in France, you had these big student riots, and you have the Communist Party of France essentially rejecting any collaboration with them because they're upstart youths, essentially that's what's going down. Back in '68, in France, they're like, oh well, we're big old communists and we've read all these books and these students don't know what they're talking about. We're basically not going to unite. And if you go back to, again, my pet thing of the German Revolution and Civil War, a lot of times you have these people kind of they're catching up to the mass. They're catching up to the spirit of, you have all these sailors, workers, soldiers that are ready to organize, ready to strike, ready to make it more concrete. And you have a lot of these leaders going, oh, I don't know, should we? We have these 50, 100 person councils of people going kind of, I don't know, let's wait, what's going on? It's like, no, you need, part of it is kind of an attitude thing of just like, even if right now we're not at war and we need to correctly identify that it's not the time for occupations, even if it's not a time for violent measures, it is a time always for strict organization. Something that people like the Panthers can really show us is that there's always a space for being regimented. And I think this still fits in with a liberation ethos. I don't think it takes away from our freedom if we learn how to better work with each other. I mean, because I think properly understood, like a people's organization is about us keeping each other accountable and keeping up on each other's standards and creating a mutual process by which we start to move as a unit. And we need to put ourselves through that process. We live in a heavily atomized world. We're segregated and separated by social media, by our different ethnic considerations, our class considerations, whatever. This is where, in a way, I want to surpass all of that. I don't want to stop someone just because, you have wealthy parents or whatever. Obviously, I'm going to look at you different because that's going to be troublesome. But in a way, it's like, no, it shouldn't matter. If you're committed to this cause of changing the way things are done, of learning collaboration truly for all people, between all people, then let's do it. Let's actually go through that process. And I think we don't need to have one big party. We don't need to have one big union. There can be different groups that say, okay, we're one group. We're splitting from another group. We're willing to do this and this as an alliance. But because we want to keep our vision clear, we're not going to stay under the same name. And we're just going to keep it that way. Historically, that was a big problem. People wanted to fight so much over, oh, well, I'm the Independent Socialist Party. Well, I'm the Socialist Revolutionary Labor Front. Well, I'm actually the Communist Workers, whatever. There was all this thing of and they wanted to fight. My thing is, let's have all these little groups, but then let's come back together and rebuild bridges. Because again, I believe in cells. I believe in having a mass movement. I believe in having the people have their say, but I also believe in the power of central organization when it comes to, planning and making suggestions for these small groups for their movement. So I think that's all in play here. So again, I know I say a lot of stuff all at once. So if you ever need me to like slow down and focus on like one thing, tell me. But also, I'm just gonna go off.
They can just literally go to half speed.
Yeah.
But I tend to do that too when I'm passionate about something. So
yeah,
identify, and I might do that right now because I think there are some things that I kind of want to, bring up because we've discussed them in the show. And I'm curious as to how you navigate these things. First, and bear with me. I'm trying to build my argument. So you mentioned, that you don't want to be conspirational, right? And so here we've had debates about conspirational theories and stuff, and I've come to the.
Wait, can you say that again? I kind of missed.
We've had debates about
conspiratorial. Oh yeah. I see.
There's no theory because when it comes to the mainstream or the main current of the left, we've fallen behind that, which I believe is a project of the state that is useful for the state to immediately reject any ideas that seem too fucking crazy. When you're a student of history, you know how much fucking crazy shit the powers that be have done. In order to maintain power. On that note, we've also had discussions here about identity politics, and by and large, I think we all reject identity politics because personally, I believe it's also a project of the state. It's something that is curated to the institutions of normalization, that define any social movement. I went to fucking UC Berkeley for 4 years, didn't graduate, but I could see that shit take shape. It's more rhetoric in like this talk of privilege, for example, is something that I don't adhere to no longer, even though I was knee deep on that shit until recently. In like organizing in San Francisco during the pandemic, and when push came to shove, a lot of people who said they were radical, they were not. They sided with the state. And also this idea of privilege, obscures a lot of basic realities. There's most poor people in the U.S. that use welfare are white people. Most poor kids in numbers are white people. But when we talk about proportions in this bullshit, we start choosing who's more more deserving of this and that. And that is, I think, it's part of the obfuscation, or like the of seeing each other, right? Because you're talking about working together, because that's the idea of this show. We've actually been disowned by certain people who were okay with us, but because we talked to someone who voted for Trump, we're no longer okay. Or because we took the position against COVID mandates, and all this shit, we were also not okay no more, right? And even though we're acting on principle, right? We're not fucking siding with the state, and so so again, conspiracy theories, I think, I actually now listen more to someone who sounds crazy than someone who will tell me the official narrative, or just the same shit that they read on the New York Times, on Wall Street, or the mainstream. And so, I mean, what do you think of this? Because I think in some levels there is a difference on how we see things, right? In this end. Do you want to share?
Yeah. I mean, this is just to clarify the reason why I said that comment about I don't want to be or I don't want to engage in conspiratorial. My part of my strategy for talking about these things is I do want to meet people where they're at. And while I acknowledge that conspiratorial information is out there, it's a niche that does exist on a mass level, I also know that it's also a flag for most people as to I should stop listening to this person. So my approach is always to deal with accepted facts first, just because I need to know what I can do with them. Because I'm also a believer in Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the truest until you can prove it otherwise, right? And then that's the thing about the until you can prove it otherwise. I think this covers the thing. We need to look for all information, right? We need to be as non-discriminatory as possible when we are inputting information. But then that being said, I think it's also a matter of trying to be aware. I say this too because when I want to talk about something like privilege, my perspective on it has been There's so many layers to this, and I do appreciate. At one time, I didn't like the idea of intersectionality. I saw it bandied about as kind of a badge or just kind of a word. But I think that actually, if it's used properly, this idea of intersectionality is very strong because there is a sense in which a simple class analysis of something might not reveal every color of an actual situation. Because just as much as you and I both know that white people use all those welfare services and they suffer and they go through a hard time, we also know that that doesn't give them any love towards black and brown people in those same situations most of the time. I'm not saying it's impossible for those white people to be friends, but we also know there's a systemic pattern of a lot of times, there not being the ability to have a class unification because there are these perceived racial, ethnic, gender, whatever things at play as well. And so I think we need to acknowledge them first and foremost. I don't think we should discount them because they make our calculations more difficult to make. I think we need to make our calculations better and more encompassing as much as possible. So that, I consider myself in certain ways, and this is a totalist. I just want to encompass as much as I am physically capable of encompassing. And so on that level, I do want to hear out feminist critique. I do want to hear out, these sort of identity-based critiques, because I think we should believe in a free space of conversation. I think that's also something else that's being expressed here. You guys want to be able to have a forum. You want this to be a place where people approach in good faith. But if they're approaching in good faith, maybe you're coming from different directions, and you're having a Socratic, a dialectical process of like going about it and trying to figure it out. Of course, totally agreed. But then that would include the people that are identity politics people, and especially on that point of like the COVID mandates. I mean, this kind of hits home in a way because I actually have a friend who I believe part of the reason why they ghosted me is because I wasn't so for all the like masking stuff and all this, and in my own reflections about this, I've had to think, well, you know what, they have their reasons. There's a lot of health stuff, there's a lot of immuno exposed people, and while I can identify that in a lot of ways they are aiding the state or whatever, I also, my holistic analysis of the situation allows me to take my foot off the gas pedal a little bit and go, well, you know what, like, it is what it is, and I, at least hopefully one day we can have an actual conversation. Like if there's a revolutionary situation and they're involved in something and I've involved in something, we can get past that, and we can have some sort of bridge. But I also understand why there was a division. I think we shouldn't get so up in it in terms of, oh, well, why are you doing this? Why? It's like, okay, like we also need to develop a sort of, all right, like like this is the process that we're in. Like we should know to identify it and oppose it. But I also think we shouldn't get too emotionally invested in when we feel like we're done wrong or whatever, because it's being done all the time anyway. I mean, the capitalists will do it, the imperialists will do it. Of course, our friends and family are going to do it too. I think in a certain way, it's going to help us as revolutionaries to build some level of nonchalantness. Obviously, our passion is our core, but I think day to day, operating with these things or talking, having one individual conversation with someone, sometimes we need to be able to go like, all right, yeah, I see you believe in all this COVID stuff and whatever, and just hear what you can. You got to be able to hear them out because we have to take in as much as possible. And obviously we still have our opinions and we go about them, and here we are. I don't know if that's an adequate response to what you were asking, but that's kind of my initial thought to some of the things you were saying.
Just on the COVID note, it wasn't just conversation. It was direct, like, effect, harm. I was forced to get vaccinated to go bury my cousin in Canada. I didn't want that shit in my body. And now we know, more information. If you're actually, actively looking for that information, there's a lot of shit that's wrong with it that we haven't dealt with the consequences of this shit yet.
Totally agreed.
Even though we ourselves in the show even like have a little moved on a little bit from that, even though that was like the primary focus of the like 2 years of our lives here, because we were all done wrong in some way. And again, it wasn't just hurt feelings. It was literally like my livelihood was threatening. Like I developed fucking anxiety. I lost a lot of fucking friends, a lot of organizing friends. So it wasn't just conversation. They literally fucking, for many reasons decided that I'm no longer cool, or my truth, right? And so and I get it. Like now that I've removed my feelings a little more from that time, I get how powerful the state is in producing these narratives in every creation. And so that brings me back to conspiracy, right? Because you have to dive into trying to decipher. We don't know the full facts. We got to make do with the pieces that we have, right? Like for example, even like someone like Fred Hampton, right? So who crossed those lines that someone.
Oh, there was a conspiracy against him. There was a provable, showable his conspiracy against him. Yeah, an action.
Like, and so then you have people like that. I believe that these are conspiracy now theories that MLK and Malcolm X were killed for the same fucking reason, because they were changing their tune, no longer doing identity politics, more about poverty and people. And so that was radical. That was a threat to the state. That now that we're a threat. Now when they were talking segmented politics, stick to your lane and that's it. And so that's a conspiracy theory. 9/11 is a conspiracy theory, right? Because we don't know the full fact of that.
And so this is another thing that I wanted to make clear too. Thank you for bringing it back up. Dude, I also say my thing out there just as a way to avoid the sort of schizophrenic reaction of getting too caught up in the loop, because I am so attracted to conspiracy theories. Like just like I don't know, because here's the thing, like I just want to tell you, like it's not because I'm someone who's like, oh, I don't know if I believe conspiracy theories. It's just that I've gone too far deep that rabbit hole. There's, you get so deep and so far away from easily verifiable facts, you get lost in the sauce, right? Like it's this whole thing. But again, I don't say that to be like, oh, stay away from that conspiracy theory stuff. No, dude, like I agree with you. Like we have so much out there, and it's good to have this conspiratorial sort of let me crack the code mentality. But this is one of those places where I do want to call for balance, because if we're going to see this movement to a real conclusion, a preferable conclusion, then we need to stay healthy. We need to stay on top of our game. We need to be, riding the wave. And I think that includes going into neither the excesses of looking only for mainstream idealism nor for occult idealism. I think we need to go between both of them.
And sorry, just one last thought. And just sorry. But that's the difficult part, right? Right, to engage in that. Like that's why I choose this extreme to put it. Like I balance this.
Go ahead, sorry, Ken.
Just to finish, so things like Pizzagate, right? When people go to places, and they accuse like the Democrats of having pedophilia rings. Yes, the fucking government does, and it's not just the fucking Democrats. So there is partial truth to a lot of these things, right? But when we attach them to people that we dismiss, then the partial truth is gone.
The baby gets thrown out with the bathwater, right? So to borrow a common term.
Yeah, and that is where I think people like that's our job, like to kind of talk through these things and be like, I agree with you on these aspects and be honest, but for this reason, just like the people who are saying that, fuck Biden, he's a socialist. No, this socialism, like. But I hear that you think there's something wrong and something needs to be done, but I just don't think that you're getting your facts right.
Yeah,
and I guess so I'm going to bring it back to the German Revolution, and the reason you thought it was so important to talk about that, because you understood that there was a political betrayal that took place at a time when there was a powerful political party, potentially a powerful revolutionary party. And you would have not asked for balance within that third. You would have said we must be imbalanced towards revolution, not balanced between some thimble.
I mean, the balance would have only been personal. Stay balanced, stay healthy, so that we can do this radical thing. Yeah.
But I would say, and the reason I would agree with you that the stakes are not as high is because I would say the identical political betrayal took place on the left in relationship to COVID, like the identical political betrayal, not. The only thing was different is we didn't have a mass political party. The left was already captured by Bernie Sanders and the Democratic Party by and large, and it only just slaughtered the left even further and divided it even more, so that it actually took on corporate entities that it might have even been critical at one time. It literally that you became, I'm big pharma. I'm for people having like literally gene therapy inside of them when you were against GMOs a little while ago. And so people were literally flipping a political without them knowing they were flipping political, which is the damage that I think you are rightly looking at the German Revolution. Now, did we have a second international that then we could see smashed? No. But I would say that from my vantage point that the political betrayal, it was as deep and as sharp in relationship to COVID and what positions that the left took around that as what you are talking about, the German Revolution. The only reason it's not live or die is because there was no Second International. Like, had there been a Second International present to watch this whole thing shatter itself, I think you'd be saying a different tune. It wouldn't just be like, dude, you got it wrong. Because your friend ultimately was taking the side of the socialists who were going to be responsible for killing your Rosa Luxemburg. That's what they were doing. And that's what they did. And in fact, they called for internment. They called for my job.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm not going to try to convince you to not.
No. I'm listening to you. I'm listening to you.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that's so hard about today is we will have principles, and we do have principles, but to know which of those things are hard lines and which of them are like fuzzy ones. And so for me, that stuff is a hard line. To hear it be fuzzy for you, I just have to remind myself we are not at a place where that makes us, we have to be enemies right now. You know, it's fine. Be fuzzy. I can be hard.
Yeah.
And, you know,
it's all good. Yeah.
But we'll continue that. The point is the conversation. And I'm kind of hoping, as long as we're all honest with each other, and this is why I started the show with Eduardo, because people were wondering why Eduardo, because he was definitely not a revolutionary. I don't know if he would consider himself revolutionary. He's like, when the socialist train gets started, I'll jump on. But fuck, he would say that. But the most important thing about him, which made him different than any liberal I'd really been with, was he was honest. The goalpost did not move with him. You know what I mean when that? Try to talk to them, and they keep moving, shifting. His goalpost didn't move. He would be with his goalpost, and he would just stick on it. It was frustrating.
Consistency,
consistent, and honest. And as long as a person's honest, I believe we can organize with them and talk with them.
I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, we're in this kind of mixed up situation where, on one hand, the stakes are different. And I do want to push back against some of your comments a little bit, just because as a historian, I think we are, and maybe this is just me being a historian, I think we're prioritizing our modern experience a little too much. I just want to ask you to imagine what it was like living through a global conflict like World War I that also included a pandemic and multiple pandemics in it. Like
we could go back to that, and you will find that it's not as simple as Spanish flu and
no, I know, but just listen to what I'm saying though. In terms of magnitude, that was way more real shit. Like that's my argument on that. Like what they were going through at that time, it was way more intense, way more real. Like that's why, in a way, I have that much more real kind of distaste for those leaders, for those people, compared to the people that are in the modern day. Because I have to look at the people at the modern day, and it's like, we don't even, like you're saying correctly, we don't have an international. We don't have a real socialist movement. We don't have a real mass movement. At that time, they had a real mass movement. But, they had and they were going through the worst conflict that humanity had ever seen.
We didn't have it in the United States, but of course, at the time, the Yellow Vest movement was massive in France.
Of course,
it was smashed by COVID.
Smashed. I agree. I just don't want to. I don't want to equivocate falsely. That's my main thing there. I agree that that there's a massive similarity. I totally am with you, and you're making me think about it a lot. But I also, again, as a historian, my thing as a historian, I'm just like, wait, let me just it doesn't seem like it's quite on the same category, but that's just my position there.
Fair enough.
But I will say, in the response to the rest of what you said, I agree that we need to be very straight up about the fact people took statist sides and they have made flips, and we need to do what we're doing right now. We're here talking about the fact that historically there was 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4. Right? We could make we could make a whole podcast itself. If we wanted to, we could do a whole spin-off podcast called The Revolution Betrayed. Where we do, and in fact, this might be a good idea.
No, it's not a good idea.
I don't know. I think it's a good idea because
very depressing.
Because but see, but this isn't. That until we subject ourselves.
Fair enough. Okay.
To understanding, to actually looking at that moment, we're not going to be the revolutionists that are going to make that revolution happen. We need to look at that ugliness, because we could spend so much time looking at this betrayed revolution.
Yeah. And
we should. Because I think that's what, the fact that we avoid it is what gives the moderates of today, the reformists of today, the ability to be like, well, let's just wait a little bit. But my thing is, no, this is a story that's been, in some ways, that has been going on since the very beginning of civilization. To return to us talking about being civilized as an excuse, civilization itself is a system of oppression. I imagine a different civilization that is so fundamentally different than the one we exist in today, that any calls for civility have to be taken not just with a pinch of salt, but with pepper and lavender and rosemary and paprika and whatever the hell else you can find in your herbal cabinet. Because these are problems that we've been facing for so long. I have a problem with religion. I have a problem with leadership. I have a problem with the fundamental way we do education. But that's why I say we need social revolution. And that's where what we're doing right now, in a way, it is direct revolutionary stuff. Yeah. While I'm not going to be a Bordigist and say we should sit in our armchair all day, I do think, especially because of the times in which we live in which people are trapped so much in this information highway. Well, fuck it. Sorry, I don't know if I need to be censored or anything, but we need to actually engage in this, let me borrow a right-wing term here, info war. We need to be engaged in this psychological conflict, and we are both informing our allies, right? Calling up our supposed close opponents, right? The Social Democrats. And we're giving a chance to any unaffiliated or opponent people, if they, for whatever reason, feel tempted to hear our side of the story. We're going through it and we're saying, hey, there were these historical conflicts. There are these historical examples. Look into them. It's an open invitation. We're doing the work right now, in a way. I'm not going to try to exonerate us and say, we've done it, let's sit back and enjoy ourselves. But I will say this is a part of the work that we need to do. We need to inform. We need to have critical conversations about so-called dead topics, because nothing ever really dies. That's why I am a nerd. But anyway.
Okay. I think we have found
the conclusion.
No. I think we have found our I just wish you were a woman, because
I know. I was about to say we're all men right now. Like, this is not a good look.
I think because Hannah and Jessica have taken their long sabbaticals. I don't know when they're coming back.
Can we get a token?
No, I mean, I don't believe in tokenism either. It's just that if you are of a different gender, you're going to have a different perspective, and it's good to have as many, different collaborative perspectives as possible. I agree, totally.
But since they're taking their long sabbaticals forever, which I don't know when they're returning, I just wish you were a woman to be able to, so I can safely say to Andy, we need to have revisit conversations with you on episodes. But yes, anyhow, I'm looking at the time. Kenny has daddy duties. I also know that.
I do want to say that the point that I was making of we are going to have to learn our history and go back through history, that these are not, these things are not dead, but they are alive. And that I completely agree with. And I don't know if I want to do a podcast that forces me to do that.
I'll do it.
But I do believe we're going to have to go back over the Russian Revolution, the Spanish Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the German Revolution, the revolutions that seemed to succeed but maybe didn't, and all that stuff is stuff we will have to go over. Not just us, but everyone. And people don't believe that. We're going to have one of the keys to thinking that there's actual revolutionary movement is people are going to be reading a lot more about history. One thing that was very interesting to me in Portugal in 1975, when they were kind of having a mini revolution, when the
Foundation Revolution.
Yeah, the State and Revolution was like number 1 or number 2 on the charts in their book, and that was like Lenin. So that's going to have to happen again in this country. If it doesn't, we will not be able to have a revolution.
Then I suppose that you didn't learn all this in school. Like
hell no! I was terrible at school, man. I'm an autodidact. Everything I've ever learned, I've learned through my own personal time. I'm not going to say I necessarily learned it on my own, but my initiative put me in situations where OGs put me on game. I was listening to people in the streets, and I'm personally obsessed with looking at every piece of written information I can possibly get my hands on. So that's how I'm at where I'm at today. The school system can go suck it. But I also work in the school system. That's because I believe, I'm an entryist in some way. I'm like, hey, let me just, real quick.
All right. Okay. Let's conclude. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Al.
All right, good. That does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on the Spotify, iTunes Podcast, Bitchute, Odysee, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. You can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes where we found this episode. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. Or if you'd like for a shout out, you can contact your teachers, such as Alex and Andy. Or anyone on our blog, or Andy on our blog specifically. He's the one who manages our blog. I'm Eduardo Varca, with co-host Kenny Cepeda and Andy Lipson, and thank you very much, Alex, for joining us. We expect you to join us back on the next episode, and thank you all for listening. Ciao.
Adios.